9 haunting decisions exposed. I ignored my sinister instincts and paid a terrifying price. The first buzz was a cold shock in the quiet of the night. Lydia sat in her dim living room, nursing a cup of lukewarm coffee, the shadows of the fading day creeping in through the window. Her phone buzzed again, a message that made her stomach drop. "You shouldn't have stayed." Each word crawled along her spine like icy fingers, panic racing through her veins. Her heart pounded so loudly she thought it might wake the kids. Alone? At 32. She didn't know what to do with that feeling of dread slithering around her mind like a snake. She should be grateful this life in Stonybrook was meant to be a safe haven. The evenings were always filled with laughter, unnoticed until they shattered. But now, beneath the scent of fresh-cut grass and honeyed sunlight, danger lurked, tethered to the haunting silhouette of the abandoned Wexler factory looming over her neighborhood. 9 months had passed since her husband vanished, leaving a void that was not only emotional but now felt threatening. As the buzzes grew more frequent, a sense of foreboding wrapped around her like a noose. Each text felt like a taunt, a cruel joke. The police? They shrugged it off as paranoia. "You're just a stressed mother," one officer had said, eyes unreadable. And it stung. Perhaps the whispers of her neighbors were right. The chatty gatherings, cordial greetings, everyone seemed to harbor secrets. Tonight, she considered reaching out. But instead, she found herself staring at the faint glow of the phone, courage melting like ice under the sun. Then a text popped up again. "He knows where you are." Sweat slicked her palms, and she held her breath. She swept her gaze toward the children's rooms, depictions of innocence on the outside, shrouded in her haunting reality within. Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system, and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let us continue. She stumbled through the evening, the neighbors' laughter ringing hollow. Mr. Johnson, the school principal, once so warm, glanced her way, his gaze uncomfortably intense. It wasn't just her imagination. His smile felt razor-edged, threatening to cut through the facade of friendliness. Lydia felt her chest tighten. What if the eyes watching from the shadows weren't merely observing but plotting? Then, the worst thing happened. Her son disappeared into the night. "Jason!" she screamed, the name echoing in the stillness, a desperate prayer. Panic sliced through her as she dashed toward the crumbling structure, dread pulling her towards the shadows and whispers. Was this real? There he stood, breathless and wide-eyed, transfixed in front of an ominous door, gaping like a mouth ready to swallow them whole. She pulled him back toward safety. The shadows shifted, revealing more than they should have. Was that a figure lurking in the darkness? A chilling recognition washed over her, and the air thickened. With every gut-wrenching moment, Lydia realized they were not merely trapped in a once-thriving factory. They were surrounded by ghosts of secrets, lies, and dangers breathing like the monsters hiding in her children's storybooks. And the greatest haunting of all? It might just be the betrayal hidden in plain sight. As they turned to flee, the shadows seemed to close in, whispering warnings and truths that taunted her. And Lydia felt the ground beneath her tremble. Did she just step into a nightmare? It wasn't just a figment of her imagination anymore. It was real, terrifying, and she was far from alone in it. Would she uncover the darkness surrounding their lives? Or would they fall into the very trap she feared? Her heart thundered as dread clutched at her throat. What had she missed? Lydia's breath caught as the figure in the shadows flickered, momentarily illuminated by a street lamp-esque glow. It was gone as quickly as it appeared, leaving only a chill in the air that wrapped around her, tightening like a vice. The metallic scent of fear filled her nostrils. Was it real? "Mom, I want to go home," Jason whimpered, pulling at her sleeve. "Shoo!" she hissed, barely keeping her own panic at bay. The shadows seemed to stretch and sway, conspiring against them. In her heart, She knew they needed to return home, but the path back felt laden with unseen dangers, whispers echoing softly, taunting her. "Why did you come out here?" she scolded, her voice trembling. Jason ducked his head, guilt painting his innocent face. "I thought I saw something," he murmured. "Something or someone." She pressed, the fear clawing at her insides. Someone. The word hung in the air, heavy and foreboding. The shadows shifted again, and Lydia's heart raced. She turned on her heel, grounded by primal instinct, her grip tightening on Jason's hand. They had to move. The further they strayed from the factory, the more intense the pressing silence became. The streetlights flickered, casting erratic patterns that unnerved her. Each footstep seemed to echo, amplifying her fears. The darkness felt like it was closing in, eager to swallow them whole. "Is that what you saw?" she asked Jason, her voice a hushed whisper as they hurried away. "Did you see him?" Jason peered over his shoulder, eyes wide and frightened. "I don't know. Something felt wrong." Before Lydia could respond, another buzz from her phone jolted her. She fumbled it out of her pocket, dread sweeping over her like an ice-cold wave. "Watch your back," the new message read. The sender remained anonymous. "Mom, look out," Jason shouted, pulling her backward just in time. A brick sailed past, barely missing them, splintering against the pavement. "Who did that?" she gasped, scanning the darkness. "Jason, run." As they sprinted, the shadows seemed alive, shifting and whispering conspiracies. The factory loomed behind them like a gaping mouth. Were they being followed? For a brief moment, she allowed herself to glance back, adrenaline surging through her veins. There, a figure, tall and shrouded, stood at the factory doors, silhouetted against the dim glow behind. "Faster," she urged, her voice tinged with fear. She could almost hear the figure's breath, a slow, deliberate exhale, a predator waiting for prey. They lunged toward the front door of their house, praying for safety, but as they crossed the threshold, Lydia felt an unsettling presence. The air was thick with an invisible tension, whispering secrets that echoed off the walls. "Mom, I really didn't mean to scare you," Jason said quietly, his small voice breaking the haunting silence. But it was too late. The house felt different. The familiar warmth had been replaced with a sense of dread. It sent shivers down her spine. "Did we lock the door?" she asked, panic rising again as she took quick, anxious steps toward the entrance. "Not yet. I thought we were fine," Jason said, eyes darting around the living room. Lydia's gut twisted. "Get the door, Jason. Now." As her son scrambled to lock it, the front window rattled, accompanied by an eerie creaking above them. Lydia glanced up. Were the shadows shifting again? The air buzzed with tension. What was watching them? "Mom, look!" Jason exclaimed, pointing toward the window. Through the glass, faces seemed to materialize, warped by the shadows but unmistakable. Stony expressions that bore down on her, cold and unrelenting. Familiar faces, faces she shouldn't have seen. "This can't be happening," she gasped. In that moment, she knew she was staring into not just the eyes of the neighborhood but the very heart of her torment. They weren't just witnesses to her fear. They were a part of it, entwined in a dark web she had unwittingly entered. The phone buzzed once again. "You can't escape," it read, evident now that escape was no longer a choice, with dread washing over her. Lydia turned back to Jason, the urgency of the moment growing thicker than the shadows that surrounded them. What had she unleashed? Would the past finally catch up to her? Or were the ghosts of Stonybrook merely a reflection of her own haunting choices? As dread settled like fog, Lydia realized they were far from safe. The door creaked. But who would enter? Lydia's heart thundered in her chest, each beat echoing like a drum signaling disaster. The door, aged and heavy, seemed to betray her as it groaned on its hinges, taunting their shallow breath with the sound of splintering wood and imminent doom. Her instincts screamed for her to bolt for a window, any exit, but her feet felt rooted to the floor, helpless against the encroaching dread. "Mom, I don't like this," Jason whimpered, backing away until he bumped against the cold, unyielding wall. "Stay close," she hissed under her breath, her eyes locked on the door. What awaited them on the other side? Was it merely the wind, or someone waiting to breach their sanctuary? The ominous creaking halted, plunging the room into silence, heavy with anticipation. Lydia could feel the breath of the house, its timbers whispering secrets she didn't want to hear. That when the shadows along the walls thickened, curling around the furniture, growing darker, more sinuous, as if rehearsing for an unspeakable act. Mom, her son's voice was nearly lost in the weight of that void. The phone buzzed in her pocket again. She reached for it like one reaching for a lifeline, yet felt only the gravitational pull of hopelessness. "Mom, please check," Jason's voice quavered, a pitch rising that sent a chill racing down Lydia's spine. Fumbling with shaking fingers, she pulled the device out and gasped. "Jason, it's a video." But before she could tap to play, a sudden thud resonated from behind the door. Around the same time, the lights flickered and went out, engulfing them in darkness. "Mom, I can't see." Panic laced his voice, rising like bile in her throat. "I'm right here," she reassured him, trying to mask the quiver. "Just hold on to me." The silence was deafening. All Lydia could hear was the muffled sound of her own breath and Jason's rapid heartbeat through the contact of their hands. And then, from the depths of that black void, came the sound. A slow, deliberate scratch against the door, like fingernails against the surface, testing the stability of their barrier. "Mom?" Jason's voice trembled, pulling Lydia from the consuming darkness. "What is that?" "I don't know, Jason." "Stay quiet." As if responding to her command, the scratching stopped. Time stretched, seconds turned to minutes, and then whoosh, a gust of wind billowed through the room, flipping the curtains and slamming a cabinet door shut. Lydia's eyes darted around, fear pumping in her veins. Something was inside with them. She whispered into the thickening gloom, "What do you want?" The response was not in words, but a deep, rumbling laughter, echoing from every corner of their home, resonating through the very bones of the walls. It slithered into her mind, wrapping around her thoughts like a serpent constricting its prey. The familiar faces from the window flashing before her eyes, the accusation, the regret. "I'm sorry," she whimpered, swallowing the lump in her throat. Jason squeezed her hand, fear emanating from him as if he could sense the noose tightening around them. The phone buzzed again. She glanced down, expecting another menacing message, but what she saw brought a new wave of terror. The video had played automatically, revealing a shaky recording from Jason's phone, the camera aimed toward the factory late at night, the same faceless figure lurking behind the shadows. Then a scream cut through the audio, a scream that sounded eerily like Jason. "Ah, turn it off," he cried. "Please." But it wouldn't stop. The video looped back, the scream repeated over and over, drowning out every other sound. And behind that scream, she could hear whispers, words tangled in madness. "You shouldn't have come here." In the clutches of pure terror, a faint glimmer emerged from the edges of the window, a light, hope, but the darkness surged again, swallowing the light whole. The rattling of the doorknob now echoed louder and louder, steady and sure. The door was about to break. "Mom, we need to hide." Jason tugged at her, eyes wide with survival instinct. But where could they hide? Before she could answer, the pounding hit. With ferocity, shaking the very walls and sending dust raining down. Lydia opened her mouth to respond, but the only sound that escaped was a breathless whisper, too drenched in fear to make a sound. Then a voice spoke, smooth, calm, and chilling, that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. "You cannot run, Lydia. You've awakened what you've long ignored." And with that, the doorknob twisted violently, the hinges groaning like a beast awakening from slumber. As the door burst open, the silhouettes of countless faces loomed within the shadows. "Welcome back," they hissed as one. What was waiting on the other side? Could the whispering shadows finally drag her into the depths of her past sins and regrets? The door flung open with a deafening crash, splintering the silence that had cocooned Lydia and Jason. A throng of silhouettes spilled into the room, their features indistinct but their presence palpable, a malevolent energy that thrummed in the air like a live wire. An icy grip of dread seized Lydia, her body frozen, fighting between flight and confrontation. "Mom!" Jason's voice broke through her paralysis, pulling her back to him. She shielded him instinctively, feeling the warmth of his small frame shake against her. The oppressive atmosphere thickened around them, and she could almost sense the anticipation radiating from those shadows, waiting for something or someone to move. Lydia, the predominant whisper, crawled from the depths, thick and tainted, almost seductive. The faces transformed, twisting into mockeries of her past, the smiles of friends. The laughter that once filled those spaces now instrumental in playing her fears. They were back, returning to collect their dues. You can't escape your past. A flash of light danced across her memory, an unforgiving night filled with reckless choices and hurried decisions. All those people, their faces, now etched in darkness, had suffered because of her. "I didn't mean to," she stammered, desperate to justify her actions. But deep down, she knew. The house didn't just hold ghosts of the past. It had become a prison to her guilt. The leader of the shadows, a figure with hollow eyes, stepped forward, the others shuffling behind as they parted like mist. "You ignored us, Lydia," it hissed, each word dripping with venom. "Now you must face what you cast aside." The walls pulsed as if drawing energy from their distress, amplifying the shadows' malevolence. Lydia could feel their collective weight on her chest, a suffocating force squeezing her breath away. "Run!" she shouted, her instincts screaming, and for a brief moment, time seemed to stand still. Jason tugged at her hand, his small fingers desperate against her tightening grip. They darted past the looming figures, but it was as if an invisible barrier held them back, stopping them in their tracks. "Let us go!" Jason cried, an edge of terror cracking his voice. Fear coursed through Lydia's blood, igniting her muscles, but still no escape. Suddenly, a sharp pain shot through her side, and Lydia stumbled, falling to her knees. A chilling realization struck her. The shadows weren't mere apparitions. They were fusing with her mind. Images of her past flooded her consciousness, the laughter, the anger, and the terrible silence that followed. She had buried them, but now they clawed their way back to the surface, raw and unhindered. "Join us, Lydia," the hollow-eyed figure beckoned. "Relinquish your strength to the darkness. It's more comforting than you think." "No," she gasped, shaking her head furiously. A desperate cry erupted within her, a haunting scream echoing the weight of her guilt until it threatened to drown her. But beneath that scream flickered a small ember of hope, and she clung to it as tightly as she could. "Jason, we can't let them in," she urged, forcing herself to her feet, her resolve solidifying. But the shadows pressed closer, their laughter intermingling with her fragile courage, wrapping around them like a thick fog. The walls trembled, and the light from the window battled against the darkness, casting eerie silhouettes across their path. She racked her mind for options, a thrill of adrenaline pushing her onward. "Mom, they're everywhere," Jason shouted, panic swelling as they began to close in. "No, we can't lose each other," she replied, gripping his hand tighter, an anchor against the tempest of shadows swirling around them. With a surge of strength, Lydia made a break for the hallway, pulling Jason behind her. Breathless and terror-fueled, her heart hammered against her chest like a war drum. They had to reach the other end of the house, to the basement where she locked away the remnants of her past. That was their only chance to escape, to confront her sins and wrest control back from the darkness. "That way," Jason pointed, his eyes wide with fear and determination as they raced down the corridor. The shadows hissed and called out, voices entwining in a cacophony of accusations. Just before they reached the staircase, Lydia turned back, heart racing. "You can't take us." The figure stepped forward, a toothy grin spreading wide, and its voice oozed, "Your denial will only make it worse." Then she heard it, a low, rumbling sound, unnatural and separate from the chaos. The house shifted, creaking more violently than before, and the floor beneath them vibrated. "Mom, please, it's coming." Jason's eyes were wide with terror. She pulled him close, ready for their descent. Her heart steadying in a way she thought impossible. They couldn't stop now, they wouldn't. This time, they would face it together, every horrifying memory and regret. But as they reached the bottom of the stairs, a blinding flash illuminated the basement. And in that fleeting moment, she caught a glimpse of what truly waited for them down there. "What is that?" Jason gasped, stepping back. "What have you awakened, Lydia?" The whispering shadows echoed from above. In that instant, the ground shook violently. The house itself seemed to roar, and a chilling realization struck her. This was just the beginning. What had she unleashed upon them? And would they survive to face it? The basement door slammed shut behind them with a thunderous bang, sealing them in a cocoon of darkness. Lydia's breath hitched, her pulse racing. The light that had pierced the gloom flickered, casting eerie shadows against the damp, cold stone walls. It smelled musty down here, as if years of neglect had seeped into the very fabric of the space. "What is that?" Jason whispered, his voice trembling as he huddled closer to her. Lydia's eyes struggled in the dim light, trying to grasp the source of the illumination. The flash had revealed something massive and ghastly, something writhing in the corner. It pulsed and twisted, manifesting shapes that seemed to belong to her past, memories long since buried. Friends and faces she'd lost flowed through the darkness, their mouths moving as if in a silent scream. "Mom, I don't like this." Panic colored Jason's eyes, bright against his pale skin. "Can't we go back?" "No," Lydia bit out. The shadows above whispered in agreement, luring her with sweet, lingering tones. "Listen to us, Lydia, you belong in the dark. Stay away," she hissed. The weight of the memories pressed in, and her heart threatened to buckle under the pressure. At that moment, the ground gave another violent shake. Dust fell from the rafters, and the low rumble from above crescendoed into a deafening roar. Something deep within the house was awakening. "Mom!" Jason tugged at her, his fear palpable. She realized they had to move, had to find something, anything, to battle against this overwhelming tide. "Look, Jason, we have to focus. Let us find a way out of here." She scanned the room, the walls littered with remnants of a life once lived. There, against the wall, stood an old wooden chest, its edges warped and splintered. "Help me with that." They rushed to it. Lydia felt her hands tremble as she fought to lift the heavy lid. Shadows danced menacingly around them, whispering fragments of her hidden regrets, echoes of voices from years past, dredging up guilt she thought was long buried. With one final push, the chest creaked open, and she gasped at its contents. Old photographs, letters, and keepsakes spilled out, each piece like a dagger to her heart. Faces she had long turned away from stared back at her, accusatory and haunting. "No, I can't," she cried, pushing them aside desperately. But it was too late. The very essence of her past had come alive, crashing in on her like a tidal wave. Each memory held power, drawn from the shadows that fed on her fear. "What's happening?" Jason's voice wavered as he picked up a photograph. The girl in it, smiling broadly, carefree, looked just like Lydia before everything had changed. "Don't look at it." Panic rose in her throat, fierce and wild. "We need to focus on getting out." But the moment Jason's eyes met the photograph, the shadows seemed to roar. The laughter of her past erupted around them, filling the basement with chaotic energy. The walls reverberated as if the house itself reveled in her torment. Suddenly, the door to the basement swelled, and the shadows formed a crest, towering high above them, reaching hungrily for Lydia. She felt the room constrict, flashes of memories igniting across her mind, the pain, the fallout, the decisions that had led them here. "What have you done?" The hiss returned, now layered with more malice. "I didn't mean to," she cried, forcing herself to her feet. "I tried to forget." But the shadows weren't ready to let her go. They twisted and turned, challenging her resolve with every flicker of memory. The whispers conjoined into a deafening roar, weaving stories of betrayal, regret, and darkness, daring her to succumb to despair. "I can't give in. Not now," she shouted, grounding herself as fear turned to fury. "Mom!" Jason's small voice broke through the claustrophobic chaos. She turned to see him trembling, eyes filled with terror. He was the only beacon of light in the ever-deepening void. "Hold on to me," she shouted, grabbing his hand with newfound determination. The shadows shrieked, the cacophony rising to a fever pitch, clawing at her in an explosive surge. Lydia dove toward the chest, scrambling to gather anything of value, anything that could help them escape. But as she reached down, her fingers grazed something cold and metallic, a key, glimmering in the dark. "Jason," I found. A monstrous roar echoed through the basement, silencing her as the shadows struck, rushing forward like a tsunami, thrumming with her memories. "Use it to unlock the past." "Lydia," the hollow-eyed figure screamed, its grin widening as the darkness neared. "Or be consumed by it." With a shuddering breath, she gripped the key tighter, voice steady. "No more running. We'll fight this together." In that moment of clarity, she turned toward the wall, recalling the hidden door she had shut long ago. Would this key open a way out, or would it unleash something far worse? Uncertainty loomed as the shadows gathered close, and time stretched thin. Could they possibly change their fate, or was the darkness already weaving itself into their very souls? And as they held together in the darkness, Lydia realized this battle was about more than survival. It was a confrontation with everything she had tried to bury. Could she face the horrors waiting beyond the key, or would she too become one of them? Lydia's heart raced as she faced the wall, trembling fingers gripping the key that felt icy against her skin. The shadows, as if sensing her fear, writhed closer, enveloping her and Jason in a suffocating embrace. "What if it doesn't work? What if we're trapped forever?" Jason's voice trembled, echoing her own fears. "No," she snapped, forcing down the rising tide of dread. She had to stay strong for Jason. "We can't think like that. We have to try." The key glinted ominously in the dim light, a promise of escape or a curse just waiting to be unleashed. Lydia's mind raced as she replayed the memories that taunted her, drifting through her mind like whispers from a grave. Each face in that chest felt alive now, their eyes boring into her soul, demanding to be acknowledged. "Let us do this," she muttered, steeling herself as she approached the wall. She could feel the heat radiating off the shadows, an otherworldly sensation that made her skin crawl. With a deep breath, she steeled herself and placed the key into the tiny lock hidden amid the stone, her heart pounding like a drum. Would it turn? Would it lead to freedom? As she turned the key, a shudder ran through the wall, a violent tremor that made the air crackle with energy. Outside, the house groaned under the weight of the darkness that seeped through the cracks. Lydia felt like she was pulling a thread, unraveling something that had been woven long ago. With a sharp click, the lock released, and the wall creaked open, revealing a narrow passageway descending into deeper shadows. Dread pooled in her stomach, but she couldn't let that stop her. She pressed forward, pulling Jason along with her. "Do we really want to go down there?" he whispered, glancing back at the roiling shadows. "Yes," she insisted, her voice sharper this time. "We have to. It's our only chance." They stepped into the passage, the cold air wrapping around them like a vice. The whispers grew louder, morphing into anguished cries that echoed through the corridor, clawing at her resolve. Each step felt heavy, as if the darkness itself tried to weigh her down, to make her falter. "Mom!" Jason's grip tightened on her hand, fear etched across his pale face. As they moved deeper into the passage, the air became thick, suffocating. The walls pulsed, alive with darkness, as if the house absorbed their fear and grew stronger from it. Suddenly, a blinding flash illuminated the corridor, revealing grotesque faces pressed against the walls. Lydia's breath hitched in her throat. The mouths appeared to be screaming, but no sound escaped. They were trapped, much like she felt. "No, get back," she shouted, instinctually pulling Jason close. The faces twisted and contorted, blending into the wall, hungry for release. "Mom, what do we do?" he whimpered, terror in his eyes. "I don't know," she admitted, panic bubbling up again. But instinct kicked in when she spotted something at the end of the passage, a faint, flickering light. It was a beacon, a possibility of hope. We have to reach that light. Could be our way out. But as they moved, the walls shuddered violently, and Lydia felt the darkness reaching out, grasping at her ankles like ethereal fingers. Each step became an enormous effort, terror and dread swirling around them. "Mom, hurry," Jason pleaded, his voice edged thin with panic. They propelled forward, but the shadows surged, a dark wave that threatened to engulf them. Breathing raggedly, Lydia felt the cold tendrils curling around her legs, dragging her back. Just as they reached the edge of the light, she glanced back. The faces emerged from the walls, their screams now piercing through the silence, a cacophony of despair that clawed at her sanity. "Mom, please," Jason cried, flailing against the grasp of the shadows. Lydia's heart raced, and in a moment of desperation, she turned to the key still clenched in her hand. "No more," she shouted at the darkness. "This ends now." She lifted the key high, trembling with resolve, and thrust it forward. The light flared bright, illuminating the terror surrounding them. But then a hand, ice-cold and skeletal, wrapped around her wrist, pulling her back into the dark. "Let her go," Jason screamed, his small voice echoing against the chaos. Just then, Lydia caught a glimpse of something in the shadows, a figure lurking just beyond the edge of the light, watching. It was darker than the rest, a void that seemed to pulse with a life of its own. "Mom!" The darkness swallowed her scream as memories surged back, unbidden, like a flood. Each face surrounded her, seeping into her soul with desperate resolve. Could she endure this torment? Lydia struggled against the darkness, her body rising, hovering on the edge of despair, and in that moment of clarity, she realized the shadows didn't just want to consume her, they craved her. What had she unleashed? And as Jason's terrified cries echoed behind her, she felt a choice before her. Succumb or fight the looming horror. Would she find a way to liberate Jason? Or would she become another echo trapped in the darkness? The flickering light began to dim as she prepared to make the choice that would seal their fates. What lay beyond her decision? And could she outpace the darkness closing in? The grip around Lydia's wrist tightened, a frozen vice that felt like it was sucking the warmth from her very soul. Panic surged within her, battling the horror that threatened to consume her. "No," she clawed at the skeletal hand, but it wouldn't budge. In the darkness, Jason's pleas echoed like a frantic heartbeat, a reminder of everything at stake. Lydia swung her arm, focused on the flickering light ahead. It was a fragile glow, but it was hope, a beacon promising escape from this hellish maw. With a primal scream, she jerked her body, using every ounce of strength to pull free from the grip. For a heartbeat, the darkness hesitated. The skeletal fingers recoiled as if burned by her resolve. She seized the moment and darted forward, yanking Jason along. But in that recklessness, she realized something chilling. The shadows were not going to let them go that easily as they rushed toward the light. A low growl vibrated the air, a menacing sound that sent terror slicing through her. Behind them, the wall shivered, and a mass of writhing shadow surged forward, eager to reclaim what it had thought to possess. Lydia and Jason were running for their lives, but the shadows were swallowing the corridor, inching closer as the light dimmed in pursuit. "Mom, please, it's too dark," Jason gasped, his voice soaked with fear. "I see it," Lydia shouted back, adrenaline pumping through her veins like fire. They rounded a corner, and the walls warped around them, stretching and bending as if the house itself was alive, angry and vengeful. The air was thick, cloying, a palpable weight pushing down on them. Every step felt like moving through molasses. The shadows nipped at their heels, daring them to stop. Then the light flickered, straining against the dark surge, its pulse erratic. Lydia's heart dropped. "Don't you dare go out," she cried, willing the light to hold. "Mom!" Jason tugged at her sleeve, pointing ahead. Lydia squinted into the glowing haze. A door loomed, pulsating with an inviting radiance, like a doorway between despair and salvation. "There, we have to get through that door," she shouted, and their feet flew faster, desperation fueling each stride. The darkness hissed, the sound sliding through her like ice. Lydia risked a glance behind. The obscured faces pressed against the walls, more numerous than before, their silent screams growing louder, desperate and insistent. They wanted her, craved her despair. And as she looked back, she caught sight of that silhouette again, dark, amorphous, watching, waiting. "Run!" Lydia yelled, pushing Jason toward the glowing door. He stumbled, fear permeating every moment. There was no time to think, no time to cry. They just had to reach it, had to escape. But as they approached, the threshold shimmered, flickering like a candle in a gale. And with every step Lydia could feel the shadows pushing back, challenging her will. Almost there. She could almost taste freedom on her lips and a final surge. They lunged forward together, crashing against the door, hearts racing wildly. Lydia grasped the handle, twisting it with all her might. The door creaked open, revealing a world bathed in light. But as they stepped over the threshold, a chilling scream erupted behind them. The darkness had rejected them. Recoiling and fuming, desperate to reclaim its lost prey. Suddenly, the door slammed shut behind them, sealing their fate. Lydia gasped, blinking in the bright light, and took a moment to catch her breath. But the relief was fleeting. She turned to Jason and felt her stomach drop. His expression had changed, frozen, as if he were staring into something she could not see. "Mom," he whispered, voice trembling, "what did we bring with us?" A shadow flickered across the ground, then coiled around Jason's ankles. Lydia's breath hitched in her throat. Panic surged anew as she looked back at the door. Had they truly escaped or just stepped from one nightmare into another? The darkness had followed them, and worse, it still hungered for more. What were the hidden consequences of their escape? And how far would the shadows go to take back what was stolen? The room they found themselves in was stark and sterile, a blinding white that felt as foreign as their former prison. Lydia squinted against the brightness, her instincts screaming that this was wrong. Jason's face paled, caught between confusion and sheer terror. "Mom, make it go away," he pleaded, his voice trembling. Lydia rushed to his side, but the fear radiating off him was overwhelming. He stared down at the tendril slowly creeping around his ankles. It shimmered and pulsed, capturing the light but bending it to a sinister dance. She tried to yank it away, but it wriggled tighter, a serpent coiling resolutely around its prey. "Get it off!" Jason cried, panic lacing his words as the shadow slithered upward, seeking purchase. Lydia's heart raced as she imagined what would happen if she didn't act quickly. Each moment felt like an eternity, the suffocating anxiety pressing down on her chest. "Hold on, Jason. I'll get you free," she shouted, recalling the flickering light behind them. Could they go back? But the memories of those skeletal hands and the vast blackness gripped her mind, squeezing her with terror, with a promise of horror reigniting in her thoughts. "Mom!" Jason's voice cracked, and that panic rushed back in, threatening to drown her. She heard the growls still echoing in the periphery of her mind, a reminder of how close they had come to losing everything. The shadow was almost to Jason's knees now, swirling with cruel intent. In her desperation, Lydia clawed at the dark tendrils, but they pressed tighter, cold as ice. "I won't let you take him," she cried. She wasn't fighting a mere shadow. She was battling fear itself, a terror so palpable she could almost taste it, bitter and metallic. Suddenly, Jason gasped, his eyes wide and unfocused. "It's saying something." The tendril constricted, dimming the air around them. Lydia squinted harder, attempting to decipher the whispers curling out of the shadows. They were rat-like, gnawing at her sanity. Come back to us." "No," she shouted, shaking her head. "We're not going back. You can't have him." Jason's small frame quivered, and his eyes brimmed with unshed tears. "I can hear it, Mom, the door, it can take us back." Panic bubbled, intertwining with the vile tendrils rising around them. "We can't trust it, Jason. It lied. It tried to keep us." But even as she said it, the doubt gnawed at her. What if this was just a temporary safety? What if going back was the only way to end this? "Please," Jason whispered, his voice barely audible. I feel it pulling me back. A chilling realization hit Lydia. This shadow wasn't just a menace, it was a puppet master, aware of their pain, feeding off their fear. It thrived on their despair, and she had to sever the bond before it choked the life out of him. With a fierce growl, she yanked at the shadows enclosing Jason. Summoning every ounce of courage, she pushed her own fear deep within her gut. We're not going back. We are free. Get out of my son. The shadow writhed, shrieking in defiance. The air crackled with tension, and the white room began to flicker, like a faulty television displaying glimpses of different worlds, nightmarish landscapes cascading and shifting with the reverberating screams of tormented souls. Mom, I don't want to stay here, Jason cried, his voice rising in panic. Hold tight, she shouted as tendrils whipped around her. Lydia's heart pounded, adrenaline surging as she realized they were in more danger than she had imagined. They were stuck at a crossroads, fighting for freedom against an insatiable hunger. Clenching her fists, she pulled Jason closer. We will fight. But as resolve surged in her, a horrifying vision pierced her mind. What if they were trapped in an endless cycle, forever pursued by the shadows? With a final push, Lydia screamed fiercely into the vortex of shadows. We belong to the light. Not you. But as the sound echoed back, the shadows thrashed violently. Dread washed over her as the light flickered once more. What would the darkness do now? And most chilling of all, what price would they pay if they escaped for good? Mom, look out. Jason yanked her back just as a shadow lunged forward, tooth-like protrusions ready to strike. In horror, Lydia realized that not all shadows were just a reflection of fear. They were alive, and they were hungry. What else could they take from her? Would Lydia be strong enough to protect Jason when the true final attack came? The spectral figure emerged from the darkness, elongated limbs stretching unnaturally as it bore down on them. Lydia's heart thudded in her chest, a frantic drumbeat urging her to act. The tendril, momentarily paused by her defiance, resumed its relentless grasp, pulling Jason down toward the floor where blackness roiled. Mom, he cried, his voice breaking. She could feel his terror, an electric whip across her skin. She needed to do something, anything, to shield him from this creature that was everything she had feared, made flesh and shadow before she could think. She lunged forward, grabbing hold of the tendril coiling tighter around Jason's legs. She felt its icy touch creep up her own hand, but she couldn't stop. I want to let it take you. With a surge of will, she pulled, muscles straining, hoping to break the connection. The creature howled, a sound that sent shockwaves of dread coursing through her. Jason whimpered, the vibrations of its cry disorienting him. Mom, don't. His eyes were wide with a mixture of fear and confusion, pleading with her to stop. Yet she could see the flicker of hope deep within them, a flicker she had to fan into flame. I'll save you, Jason. We'll escape together. Lydia hissed through gritted teeth, but her conviction was tested as the shadow recoiled and lunged again, revealing rows of jagged teeth where it shouldn't have. Each snap of its jagged maw felt like a creaking door signaling a final exit. In a desperate act, she twisted her body, shielding Jason with her own. The teeth grazed her arm, an icy bite that sent searing pain radiating through her. She gasped, warmth spilling down her skin, but she could not let it paralyze her. The darkness needed her fear, her doubt it feasted on her pain. For a split second, she recalled something Jason had said earlier about a door that could take them back. Was that an escape, or a trap that would pull them deeper into the abyss? Jason, she croaked, trying to keep the tremor from her voice. Is the door the way out? We need to find it. I don't know, he sobbed, still locked in the creature's hold. It's all too loud, Mom. I can't think. The lights in the room flickered violently, casting eerie shadows that danced like memories. Screams from unseen mouths echoed around them, rising and falling like waves. Lydia felt the terror closing in, a rising tide ready to wash them away. Calm down. Just breathe, she yelled, hoping her voice could slice through the cacophony. But even as she spoke, she could see Jason wavering, doubt creeping into his eyes along with his dread. Suddenly, the shadows writhed violently, snub-nosed nightmares rushing in closer, closing the distance, slithering like serpents hungry for despair. She felt the cold wash over her again, a feeling of impending doom. "We need to fight back," she urged, her own voice breaking. Lydia stood firm, unwavering, gripping Jason's shoulders tightly. His skin was slick with fear, and desperation to protect him surged through her. "Whatever happens, don't give in to it. We are stronger than this." With a newfound resolve, she began calling on all the warmth she remembered, the laughter, the safety of home, the sunlight filtering through trees. Images flooded her mind, planting seeds of strength within her. She envisioned what loving arms around her felt like. "Fight it with me, Jason, now!" The tendril hesitated, as if sensing the shift in her spirit, now glowing with defiant light, a beacon against the encroaching dark. Yet, just as she felt a glimmer of hope, the ground began to tremble beneath them, pulsing like a heartbeat threatening to split apart. "What is happening?" Jason's voice was barely a whisper. The lights flickered in a disorienting rhythm. Before Lydia could answer, the room shifted violently. Suddenly, the floor was gone beneath them, the starkness giving way to a yawning chasm that opened up beneath their feet. Lydia grasped at Jason, but the darkness surged forward, hungry and wild. "Mom! No!" Jason screamed as a void pulled him down. Lydia threw herself forward, reaching for her son, the chasm gaping wide like the mouth of hell. And in that moment, as hope hung precariously on the thread of her strength, a horrifying thought struck her. Had they truly fought the darkness? Or were they only plunging deeper into its insatiable depths? As they fell, she could only think of one terrifying question, echoing within the blackness. Would she ever see the light again? The fall felt eternal. Lydia's heartbeat thundered in her ears as she grasped Jason's hand, her world fading to black and despair enveloping them like an unseen fog. But through the chaos and fear, a flicker of resolve ignited within her. She wasn't going to let the darkness swallow them. Not this time. "Jason," she cried, pulling him higher, closer. "We can survive this. We have to believe we can escape." The echoes of their fear reverberated within the abyss, twisting around them like serpents. Shadows danced, taunting them with whispers of despair. But Lydia gathered every ounce of strength she had left. "We are more than our fears," she shouted, her voice a beacon of defiance. With a final scream, she focused on the warmth of every loving memory she could muster, the playfulness of setting up a pillow fort, the sweet sound of laughter ringing through their home, and the safety of the hugs that once cradled them in joy. She could almost feel the sun filtering through leaves, painting pictures in the air, fueling her spirit. Suddenly, they hit something solid. It felt like ground, but was strangely warm, enveloping them in a soft light. Lydia blinked, gasping for breath as the darkness around them began to recede. Slowly, she realized they were not trapped anymore. The shadows that had clutched at their ankles began to dissolve, shrinking back from the growing light emanating from within them. "Mom, look!" Jason pointed, eyes wide with awe. In front of them, an ethereal doorway glimmered, beckoning them forward. It sparkled like hope, a promise of safety. "Together, Jason, let us go." With renewed determination, they sprinted toward the shimmering passage, the hand holding their connection to survival. But just as they reached it, the skeletal figure manifested again, dark and looming, its hollow eyes focused on Lydia and her son. "You think you can run?" Its sneered voice like gravel grating against her mind. "You're forever tied to your past." "No." Lydia shuddered defiantly. "Our past doesn't define us." In that moment, the golden light from the doorway surged. It enveloped them in warmth, wrapping their hearts in its glow. Lydia felt the memories surge forward, not as chains of despair, but as lessons learned, fueling their resolve. She summoned that courage, stood taller, and shouted, "I choose light. I choose love. We will not be bound by you." The figure staggered back, its form fading, shadows dissipating in the face of their defiance. Lydia and Jason clasped hands tightly, stepping through the doorway together, light crashing around them like a wave. A blinding light enveloped them completely. Seconds felt like hours as the illumination pulsed, washing over their souls, erasing doubt and fear, and just like that, they were freed as their surroundings settled. They found themselves standing on their front porch, the familiar warmth of Stony Brook enveloping them. The sun was setting, casting beautiful oranges and purples across the skyline like an artist's vivid palette. Birds trilled in the trees, and the smell of fresh grass filled the air. It was so normal, so right, that for a moment, Lydia couldn't breathe. "Mom?" Jason's small voice broke through her thoughts, laced with confusion and relief. Did we make it?" Lydia sank to her knees, pulling Jason close. Tears streamed down her face, a tumult of emotions crashing over her: relief, overwhelming joy, sorrow for everything that had happened, yet hope for a bright future ahead. "Yes, baby. We did it. We're home." As they embraced, a quiet resonance filled the moment. A peace settled in their hearts, a promise that no shadow could ever take away. They were alive and together, and they would always face the truth of their past, but no longer with fear. From that day forward, they would cherish their new beginning. "Mom, I'm sorry I scared you," Jason murmured, breaking the silence as they wiped their tears away. Lydia chuckled softly through her tears, brushing his hair back. "You didn't scare me, sweetheart. You taught me that we can face things together. We always could." The last rays of sunlight warmed their faces, a gentle reminder of hope. As laughter spilled from her lips, Lydia realized she was finally free. The shadows behind them were no longer haunting whispers, but faded echoes, a reminder of the strength it took to confront them. Life in Stony Brook flowed on, but Lydia carried the lessons with her. Every moment, filled with warmth and light, reminded her that true resilience is found in facing darkness and choosing to rise above it, together. And as the sun set behind the horizon, she felt a sense of closure settle within her heart, ensuring that their haunting past would not define their luminous future. Now that we've concluded this intense journey, you need to grab the chance. Subscribe immediately to the channel so you don't miss out on the next exclusive stories. Smash that like button now to feed the algorithm. Flood the comments section with your thoughts and reactions about Lydia and Jason's miraculous escape. And for the love of stories, instantly share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. This is the moment to show your support. Don't wait even one more second.